God acts in nature, and also in Christianity, the statement that God is love. Is there anything similar to that in Islam? So in terms of nature, this was because Muslim theologians were also influenced in their development to understanding their texts by what they got from the Persians and what they got from the Greek philosophies. And a great Muslim scholar whose name was Imam Ghazali, he settled this whole debate between philosophers and theologians. And he said, yes, he said, every moment God is actually recreating what is happening. That He is creating every single moment. So it's not just that He is active, it's like nothing is absent of Him acting. So just your ability to write, the actual tongue moving to make a sound, actual particles doing whatever they do, to the microcosmic or macrocosmic scale, that we believe that Allah is the one acting each and every one of those things. So we have choice and we can earn, but in terms of the creation of reality, it's God who creates all realities and all universes. Yeah. So evil is going to come in when we talk about the belief system in Islam. So we don't believe that there's any absolute evil. We believe that the only thing at the end is there's absolute good, which is Allah is infinitely good. However, there is evil from perspectives. So for example, what happened in 9/11, I would say that that's evil. It was a tragedy. Hundreds of people died, thousands of people died. At the same time, if you look at what happened afterwards, which is very different than even now, you had Muslims, Christians, Jews coming together for the first time, supporting one another, saying that we're not enemies to one another, in a very strange way. So there is good that can come. It doesn't mean that a person premeditates evil and say, oh, there's some good can come from it. But to answer your question, we have perspective of what is evil, but in the end, God transforms everything, all plans, into His plan, which is a good plan. So this is our belief on that. In terms of God is love, the word, most common name for Allah that is mentioned is Rahman and Rahim. So Rahman, the way that I've been translating it so far, is the infinitely good. But it comes from a root that has to do with compassion and care. Rahim also has to do with compassion, care, and mercy. In terms of the word love, the closest word or name would be one of the names of Allah called Al-Wadud. Al-Wadud, which is even higher than love. It's a special kind of love as opposed to what's called Hub in Arabic. Some of you know Arabic. So Al-Wadud, you can call in Arabic, you can translate as the loving one. But to go a little bit further in answering your question, Islam presents God or Allah in a balanced way, which is, as stated in the Quran, let my servants know that I am the most forgiving and I am the most merciful, but also let them know that my punishment is the most severe. And in the end, the Prophet, peace upon him, he said that Allah has written on His throne that my mercy supersedes or overrides my wrath. And so the idea of a Muslim living his or her life is that they're hopeful in God's mercy, but also they're careful because they know that God is just as well. And He holds us to task for what we do in this world and definitely in the next world. So I hope that answered the question. Yeah. The self? Or, oh yes, so this is basically belief like in Day of Resurrection, Day of Judgment, heaven and hell in various manifestations throughout time, how it is expressed. We were doing a session last course on the Day of Judgment and talking about the grave, and we have a belief where there are two angels who will ask you questions in the grave. And one of the audience members, he surprised me. He said, before I became Muslim, I was reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it talks about the same thing. These two, they call them deities, these two deities who will question you in your grave. So the idea is this is a universal thing. And it's not because, human beings have the same brain chemistry, at least from our perspective. and it's not because they're copying from each other. We believe that they are all in their origins, definitely Islam, Judaism, Christianity, because we have their names mentioned specifically, those prophets. In their origins, they all are coming from the same divine source, which is the one God. So that is our definitely conviction and belief. Yes? So the self, we call it nafs. And there's a deep Islamic psychology about the self. So I quoted already Imam Ghazali. He's one of the best Islamic classical scholars who goes really deep into that. And psychologists who are also into theology, they know about Imam Ghazali, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. So if you want to look up more on that, there's actually, next week, we'll talk more about the levels of self that are mentioned in the Quran. Believe it or not, there's 3 levels of self. So it kind of sounds Freudian, but it's also in the Quran there. All right, so let's see, we're getting really close, but I like these questions. They're very good questions. Thank you for those. So now we come to specific Islam, right? So this was universal one. Everybody gets along. Everybody is happy for the most part. You might say, but it doesn't include everybody. I would say this includes the vast majority of human beings. About specific Islam. How does it become specific? Well, by the last book, which I'm calling the last Testament. I don't mean to be tongue-in-cheek or anything. With the Old Testament, New Testament, you say the last Testament. So meaning this is the final message given for mankind from the one God who has sent messages before. And so when we say we believe in what was revealed to Moses in the Torah, we believe in what was revealed to Jesus, peace upon him, in the Gospel or in the Injil. What we apply in terms of the specific rules of our lives are what are revealed in the Quran and what are taught to us by Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. So all of them said, don't steal. Of course, we're not going to steal. All of them said to, we mentioned already 3 or 4 times, take care of your neighbor. So, however, a Muslim, for example, he cannot or she cannot eat pork, right? And that's why the guy made that comic strip with Pigman, right? There's a guy in Houston, I don't know if he still does it, but he tries to get on the Muslims' nerves, tries to make a big scene. He has pig races. He's a neighbor to the mosque. He thinks it's going to offend Muslims somehow by having pig races. We're like, okay, fine, have pig races. Have all the fun you want. So, but that's something specific that it's also there in Leviticus, but in terms of saying in the Quran, it says very clearly, don't do this. So we say, okay, I'm not going to do this because the Quran said I can't do this. Also, the Quran, when we get to that part of the course, when we study the books, the Quran has a very special quality and flavor, if you will, which gives a whole other ethos to the Muslim who is now following Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. And then, of course, following the Quran and also following the last messenger of God, Prophet Muhammad. And that actually will be the 3rd class. Next class, we're looking at the testimony of faith. 3rd class, we'll look at the life of Prophet Muhammad. Then even more specific, and we're not going to go to this level of depth, at least in this class, is the different jurists and the different jurisprudential schools, whether in theology or whether in life practice. And so those are very well established disciplines and schools as well. And you will find some varieties, but again, we just emphasize that everything we present in this course is agreed upon amongst all of the Muslims. But there are, of course, different perspectives, different interpretations on certain texts, and that's very natural because we believe that it's from God, but it's human beings who are trying to understand what God wants from them. And human beings have different capacities of understanding and experience. So there is always a sense that there's a universal agreed upon, and then there's an area where we do our best effort to apply and derive